Now, I will admit it is a cliche that truth is stranger than fiction, but perhaps it's a cliche because it's true. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the world of true crime. Often we get a case that seems so cut and dry. We know exactly who did it. But then sometimes, just when you think you've got it figured out, there's a new detail that surfaces that throws everything into question. Today, I'm diving into some of the most baffling cases in Southern true crime history. The thread connecting all of them is one very simple question. When two crimes seem to mirror each other, when names repeat or victims overlap, or even murder weapons match, is that a meaningful clue? Or is it just the universe playing tricks? Coincidence is everywhere if you look hard enough, but so is conspiracy. It hides in plain sight behind what looks like nothing more than chance. Welcome to Haunts and Hollows, True Tales of the Gothic South. I'm your host, mystery author Liam Ash. This episode is sponsored by my friends at Arcanoctus. They invite you to unlock your curiosity with their collection of the odd, the unusual, and the obscure. Coincidence is the spine of any good murder mystery. You have a baffling death, a cryptic clue, a shocking witness, and none of it adds up until all the pieces fall into place. And that's usually by chance or by clever deduction. True crime doesn't always work that way. Police have their methods, and investigations, with a little hard work and a little bit of luck, usually lead to arrests and convictions. So what happens when the clues point in two surprising directions? What happens when two very different crimes are suddenly connected by the slimmest of threads? In cases like these, like the ones I'll be looking at in this episode, we have to ask one important question. Is this coincidence or conspiracy? Is it a random fluke or a sign of a deadly link that lies far beneath the surface? Let me start with a pair of suspicious connections that take these crimes from ordinary, if still deeply saddening, to downright bizarre. This first one sounds kind of like the plot of a Coen Brothers movie, and it suggests that just having the wrong name in the wrong town can get you killed. So let's jump back just over 25 years to the morning of October 12th, 2000. It was a very normal morning for Houston Bank loan officer Mary Lou Morris. She said goodbye to her husband Jay, left for work, and then she simply vanished. He did try calling her throughout the day, but she never answered. While Jay was trying to reach his wife, a passerby made a gruesome discovery on a remote road just outside of town. Inside the smoldering shell of a car, he saw a charred human body. The police were called, and at first they said the body was burned beyond recognition. The medical examiner couldn't even tell how she had been killed. Within a few hours, though, they had identified the car and the body as belonging to 48-year-old Mary Lou Morris. According to her husband and friends, there was no possible motive for wanting her dead. Mary Lou Morris was successful, friendly, and very happily married. There were no traces of an affair or gambling debts or misappropriated funds, all the things that usually show up in cases like this. There were no clues at all until 4 days later. And even then, was it a clue or just a coincidence? In nearly the exact same spot, a second car with a second woman's body. Her name, also Mary Morris. This case offered a few new complications. This Mary Morris was a nurse practitioner. She was, by all accounts, incredibly good at her job, but there was one problem at work. A male coworker had allegedly made several threats against her, a pattern of behavior that led to him quitting. Mary was so scared of the man that she asked husband Mike to teach her how to use a small pistol that she could keep under the car seat. While the former coworker was investigated, he was never arrested or charged due to little evidence against him. Plus, the police had a second suspect, husband Mike. Friends claimed that their marriage was deeply strained. Mary might have actually been having an affair with a family friend, and there was a $700,000 life insurance policy on Mary that Mike was able to collect. And, most damning, Mike had made a 4-minute call to his wife's cell phone, clearly a connection and not just an unanswered call, and that was almost 2 hours after she was thought to have been beaten and then shot in the head. So, could these two Mary Morris murders be simple coincidence? Despite years of searching, no one has been able to link the two deaths. The most popular theory? Mary Lou Morris was the first unintended victim of a hit gone wrong. The second Mary Morris may have been the target of someone, of either her co-worker or her husband, who wanted her dead. If so, the coincidence wasn't that two similar women were murdered at a similar time and in a similar place. The sad coincidence is that they shared a name. The second example that comes to mind is the murder of Dorothy Donovan in June of 1991. Just after 3 a.m. on the morning of the 23rd, Dorothy's son Charles Holden and a police officer approached Dorothy's farmhouse in rural Harrington, Delaware. They noticed a broken window, and when they entered, Dorothy didn't respond to Charles's repeated calls. They soon figured out why. They found Dorothy's body in an upstairs bedroom. She had been stabbed more than 20 times. Oddly, her purse and other valuables were untouched, and there were no signs of sexual assault. The killing appeared to be a random act of senseless violence. The first person the police questioned was her son Charles, and the tale he spun was too coincidental to be believed. According to Charles, he had stopped by a Hardee's near the farm for a hamburger on his way home from a late shift. He claimed that as he was crossing the parking lot, a man asked him for a ride to Milford Memorial Hospital, where the man's sister, he claimed, had just had a baby. Charles said he thought about it and finally agreed to give the man a lift, but about half a mile from the farm, Charles stopped at his turn and pointed the man to a payphone where he could call to get a ride the rest of the way. Charles claimed the man then grew angry and attacked him with a screwdriver. They fought, chased each other around the truck, and Charles finally drove away. To throw the man off, he went a different direction at the crossroads before heading back to his trailer next to his mother's farmhouse. To his horror, he saw the man peeking into his trailer windows. So he raced back to the Hardee's and he called the police. He also claims to have called his mother back on the farm, but he never got an answer. 2 hours later, an officer arrived. Charles explained the encounter with the man, then together they discovered Dorothy's body next door. The police felt that Charles was an obvious suspect. He was having financial difficulties at the time, and Dorothy had just taken out a life insurance policy that named her son as the beneficiary. His story, they insisted, was just too coincidental. What were the odds that he would have given his own mother's killer a ride, only to have him show up at the farmhouse without any directions or help? Dorothy's death, they claimed, didn't make sense. Over the next several weeks, they were able to piece together witness testimony to different parts of Charles's story. The man had asked several Hardee's customers for a ride. Another saw the man chasing Charles at the crossroads. A third claimed the man knocked on his door on the way to Dorothy's farm. For 13 years, her death remained unsolved. In 2004, a CODIS hit to DNA found at the scene matched career criminal Gilbert E. Cannon. When confronted, he confessed. He claimed he had been looking to score drugs, and when that fell through and Charles ejected him from the truck, he went searching for a place to sleep. Dorothy's farmhouse was the only one without a light on. When he broke in and she confronted him, he killed her and fled. Despite police suspicions of Charles, what he claimed to be pure coincidence turned out to be just that, pure, unfortunate coincidence. So what about the Gothic South? When two crimes almost touch at one tangential point, is it chance or is it something much darker? In this first example, the theory is that crime begets crime. Like in a murder mystery novel, what starts as a single death soon leads to many more. This one starts, like many of these stories do, with a beautiful but eccentric woman who has made her fair share of enemies. In 1974, Athalia Ponsell Lindsley was a recently married former model living in Saint Augustine, Florida. She had been born to a wealthy family and spent most of her childhood in the Caribbean. In addition to modeling, she had also been an actress, a dancer, and a socialite, and there were even rumors that she had once been engaged to Joseph P. Kennedy before he died in World War II. Although she had recently married, she and her husband were still living in separate houses. Her new man, James or Jinx Lindsley, was a successful real estate developer. Even so, the neighbors were already saying that the match wasn't a particularly good one. Athalia was an even worse match for her next-door neighbor, a local politician named Alan Griffin Stanford Jr. She had a habit of taking in stray dogs, and he had a habit of complaining to anyone who would listen about the noise the dogs made. This went back and forth for several months. They argued at the drop of a hat, they filed complaints against each other with the city council, and in October of 1973, she even claimed that he had threatened to kill her. That coming January, he might have made good on that threat. While standing on the front porch of her home, Athalia was brutally killed by an unknown assailant wielding a machete. Witnesses saw a white, middle-aged male in a white dress shirt and dark dress pants wielding that machete. One neighbor, 18-year-old Locke McCormick, heard a struggle. He reportedly called to his mother, "Mr. Stanford is hitting Miss Ponsell." They rushed to Athalia's porch, where they found her already dead and covered in blood. According to the medical examiner, the attacker had landed 9 blows with the weapon. One finger had been severed from the hand, and Athalia had nearly been decapitated. Even so, the house was unlocked, but no jewelry or anything of value had been taken. Police noted that the only thing missing was the victim's pet blue jay, whose cage had been crushed. Alan Stanford denied committing the crime. He had witnesses both at work and at home around the time Athalia was killed. He downplayed their feud, claiming Athalia was not serious about the threats he supposedly had made. Despite his claims of innocence, the evidence was starting to stack against him. 3 weeks after the crime, a county mechanic searched a swampy area that had once been a city dump. He came up with a bundle that included a white shirt, dark blue dress pants, and a watch. The pants and shirts had blood on them. Nearby, he found a machete and a diaper. Repair records traced the watch back to Alan Stanford. The blood-covered shirt had his laundry mark, and both the shirt and pants happened to be his size. And this is where justice takes a wrong turn. Although he was arrested and released on bond, the charges didn't stick. In court, he was portrayed as a churchgoer and a beacon of the community. Athalia, on the other hand, was described as unpopular, annoying, and a little too aggressive for a woman. That was enough for the jury, who found Alan not guilty. The victim's supporters claimed that his connections to many Saint Augustine city government officials and members of the city's high society was all that it took to get him off. So far, nothing here is too shocking or coincidental, unless you count Alan's bizarre acquittal despite a mountain of evidence to the contrary. The story takes an even stranger turn in November of 1974. A former newspaper reporter named Frances Bemis was found in a vacant Saint Augustine lot. Her skull had been crushed by a concrete block, and her body had been partially burned. Frances took that same walk every night and had never encountered any hint of danger. Police had no clues, no motives, and no suspects. As they began to dig deeper into the woman's life, her case was soon connected to that of Athalia Ponsell Lindsley. Frances's friends claimed that she had been asking questions and working with another author, a woman named Nancy Powell, on a book uncovering the truth behind Athalia's death. After searching the second woman's home, they found extensive outlines and notes covering the content of this exposé. So, could Frances's death have been in response to the new book? She had no known enemies, and the area she walked was considered very safe. Was her killing a random act of violence, or was it one guilty party hoping to cover one murder by committing a second? Coincidence or conspiracy? That's the big question. To date, both women's deaths are considered open but cold cases. Let's take a look at another coincidence between two of the biggest headlines in 20th century South Florida. This is an example where the connection is obvious, but the question stands, does it actually amount to anything? This one starts with one of the oddest figures to come out of the Loxahatchee. In the 1940s and 50s, everyone in Palm Coast County knew about Trapper Nelson. He was a big guy, perhaps 6'4" and 240 pounds, and he lived in a camp that he had built along the river. He also had built a makeshift zoo filled with native plants and wild animals. He gave tours to visitors, and if they were lucky, he'd even wrestle an alligator or two. Well, it turns out that he didn't start off life as Trapper Nelson, just in case you were wondering. He was actually born Vincent Nostakovich in New Jersey in 1909. As a child, he trapped small game along the Jersey marshes for extra money, and when his mother died and father remarried, he ran away from home. He eventually found his way to Colorado and then down to Mexico, and there he was arrested for suspicion of running guns. After his release from Mexican jail, he bummed his way to South Florida, where he set up camp with a few friends, including stepbrother Charles Nelson. Turns out that things soured fast, and Charles was soon arrested for shooting and killing one of their camping buddies. Vincent, now going by Trapper, even testified against Charles, and Charles was sentenced to 20 years at Florida's Rayford prison. Now on his own, Trapper moved to the deep woods along the Loxahatchee. With a little help from his sister, he was able to buy 800 acres to start his homestead. For the next several years, he lived up to his new name. He hunted, trapped, and fished. And with the money he made selling furs and meat, he was able to amass a small land empire, mostly by bidding at tax auctions during the Great Depression. He became a well-known figure at the sales, and he even developed a few friendly, long-standing rivalries with other bidders. In the 1930s, he opened what would be called Trapper Nelson's Zoo and Jungle Gardens. Tourists would take boats down from West Palm. They could have lunch, tour the camp, and pick up a few souvenirs along the way. Rumors also started that West Palm housewives could get a little something more from the physically impressive Trapper Nelson. By the end of the 1950s, Trapper's health was beginning to decline. To make matters worse, state officials declared his tourist attractions unhygienic. Despite improvements, they forced him to close the zoo in 1960. With no source of regular income, his taxes and debts soon skyrocketed. Over the next few years, his stomach pains grew worse. With a deep mistrust for both state officials and doctors, Trapper never sought medical attention. In July of 1968, he never showed up for a planned meeting with friend John Dubois. John took a boat to what was left of the camp. There he found Trapper dead in his cabin from a shotgun blast to his stomach. There were several odd circumstances about the scene, but officials ruled it an obvious case of suicide. Let's go back a little further. So 13 years before Trapper's death, another pair of well-known Palm Beach citizens made headlines by disappearing into the night. On the evening of June 14, 1955, Judge Curtis Chillingworth and his wife Marjorie went to a dinner in West Palm. They left there about 10 p.m., arrived home soon after, and then simply vanished. When a handyman arrived the next morning, he found their door open and the couple missing. The pair's clothes from the night before were still laid out. Their bed had been slept in. Money was still safely in Marjorie's purse, and even the keys were still in the ignition of their new car. According to friends, the couple had no enemies at all. He was a very popular Navy veteran and a circuit judge. She was from a well-known, well-connected family. There was no reason for the two to disappear as they did. Given Curtis's work as a judge, police focused their investigation on his legal career. Perhaps there was a criminal or two in his past who wanted revenge. One name quickly came to light: Charles Nelson, stepbrother to Trapper Nelson. Curtis had actually presided over Charles's murder trial, where the guilty man had received his 20-year sentence. The police dug a little deeper and discovered that one of the judge's investments included buying land at tax auctions. There he was said to have had a long-standing back and forth with Trapper himself. So was it merely coincidence or something far darker? Police were not sure. Charles was thoroughly investigated, but no concrete evidence could be found linking him to the couple's disappearance. In fact, there was virtually no concrete evidence at all. Over time, the case went cold, and then 2 years later, Curtis and Marjorie were declared legally dead. The mystery finally unraveled in 1959. A man named Floyd Lucky Halsapfel bragged to a friend that he knew who had killed the couple. The friend notified police, and in September 1960, a Florida Sheriff's Bureau sting got Floyd on tape making that same outrageous claim. And it turns out it wasn't just a boast. This was ultimately Floyd's confession. He placed the blame squarely on the shoulders of another judge, a man named Joseph Peel. Joe had a history of shady dealings, and he was about to get a legal slapdown from Judge Chillingworth. This, Judge Peel feared, would screw up any chance he had of becoming Florida's next governor. To solve the problem, Joe hired Floyd and his associate Bobby Lincoln to kill the couple. They forced their way into the Chillingworth home just after 1 a.m. They took the pair to a waiting boat on the shore. They then took Curtis and Marjorie out to sea, strapped lead weights to their legs, and threw them overboard. Floyd received life in prison, while his accomplice was granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Judge Peel received 2 life sentences. He was paroled after 21 years, only to die from cancer 9 days later. While justice was served, it's an uneasy end to 2 very different cold cases where the surprising coincidences were nothing more than coincidences. For this last story, I think I've saved the best. It's one of those cases where nothing quite adds up. You've got 2 different crimes, 1 bizarre coincidence, and absolutely 0 answers. On the evening of October 14, 1965, a young woman named Mary Shotwell Little did some shopping. She went out to dinner with a friend and then vanished into thin air. The next morning, she didn't show up for work at C&S Bank. Her husband, who was out of town, couldn't reach her at home. The next day, her 1965 Mercury Comet was found in a nearby mall parking lot. There were plenty of clues. The groceries she had bought the previous night were still in the back seat. There were flecks of blood both inside and outside the car. The exterior also had a fine coat of mysterious red dust. Most alarming, a pair of women's undergarments, covered in blood, were stuffed between the front seats. Police tried to retrace her steps that previous night. They came up with nothing but more questions. Security guards noted that the car hadn't arrived until 2 or 3 hours before it was discovered. Also odd, there were 40 unaccounted miles on the odometer. Where had Mary gone, and how had the car gotten back? With nothing else to go on, investigators focused on her family and friends. She had been married for only a month to Roy H. Little Jr. In the weeks leading up to her wedding, her behavior had become erratic. Mary began acting paranoid and, according to her friends, she was scared of something. Just before her disappearance, she received an anonymous delivery of roses. Perhaps, they guessed, she was already having an affair. Or perhaps she was trying to extinguish an old flame. If so, she told no one. A month after Mary vanished, 2 credit card receipts turned up with her signature. One in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one in nearby Raleigh. The attendants remember seeing a woman that night, but couldn't give anything more helpful. Mary's case soon turned cold. There was no body, and they had no suspects. Police tracked down every available lead, but they came up empty-handed. They even tried to connect her disappearance with other recent crimes, and they had no luck there. Perhaps, however, the connecting crime just hadn't happened yet. 2 years after Mary vanished, another Atlanta woman named Diane Shields met a possibly similar fate. On the evening of May 19, 1967, Diane left work in her Chevy Impala, and she never made it home. Just after 2 a.m., police spotted her car near the drive-in window of a local laundry. The officers found the keys in the ignition and blood dripping from the back bumper. They opened the trunk to find Diane's body stuffed between the spare tire and a cardboard box. She was fully clothed, and investigators ruled out sexual assault. She also still wore her engagement ring, because she was to be married 2 months later. The only sign of anything amiss was the scarf and paper that had been forced down her throat. With few concrete clues, the police looked to her former workplace, C&S Bank, the same bank where Mary Shotwell Little had worked 2 years earlier. Employees reported that the two had even sat at the same desk. Although Diane now worked as a receptionist at another office, there were more coincidences. While at C&S, she had befriended many of Mary's old colleagues. The two women even had several past roommates in common. In one bizarre red herring, Diane's co-workers reported that she had received a bouquet of roses from an anonymous admirer just before she died. This immediately brought to mind the flowers delivered to Mary Shotwell Little. For a short time, this revelation touched off uneasy speculation that a rose bouquet killer was loose in Atlanta. This was later debunked, however, when Diane's flowers were proved to have come from a babysitting client. For their part, the lead police insisted that the connections were nothing more than coincidence. In practice, this served to keep the FBI off the case. Despite this assurance, other investigators and C&S employees insisted the two women were connected both in life and in death. They pointed to odd calls that Diane got both at work and at home, calls with no one else on the other end of the line. One of Diane's closest friends claimed that Diane was actively looking into Mary's disappearance during her time at C&S. Another man, a mechanic who had serviced her car, reported that Diane had mentioned being somehow tied up with the earlier mystery. So this begs the question, are these just imagined links between two entirely separate cases? Or are they the faint signals of something far deeper and far darker? For 40 years, both cases have remained as cold as ice, and they're likely to stay that way unless somebody makes that one critical connection. So what are your favorite bizarre true crime coincidences? Where do you draw the line between chance and conspiracy? Drop me a comment and I'll add them to a future episode. Next up, we'll tell the tales of 5 extraordinary Southern women. While well regarded in life, they became infamous in death. Their legends have now become a beating heart of Southern folklore. Want more legends and true tales from the Gothic South? I invite you to subscribe to this podcast. You'll get a new episode every other week. In each, we will uncover the places, the people, the customs, and the stories that lurk in the shadowed history of the South. You can also check out my latest book, Florida Coast, for a guided road trip to more than 80 of the darkest, most shadowed spots in the Sunshine State. If you want to see me in person, visit me online at hauntsandhollows.com. There you can find a list of latest releases and a schedule of cons and events that I attend all around the South. Until then, safe travels.